Welcome to the webinar, Navigating Macro Shifts Across the Agri-Food and Health Landscape. My name is Josh Haslam, Senior Research Director here at Lux Research, and I'm going to be moderating and presenting today's session. I'm joined today by my colleagues Harini Venkatraman, Associate Research Director, and Nardev Ramanathan, another Associate Research Director here at Lux Research. Now, throughout the webinar, you can type any questions you have in the questions box on the screen, and time permitting, we'll get to those questions. Now, if your question doesn't get answered, please don't hesitate to email it to questions@luxresearchinc.com, and we will respond. If at any point you experience technical difficulties, such as a frozen screen, just simply refresh your browser and check that your internet connection is strong. Now, with that, I'm going to jump right into the presentation here. So, as I said, we're going to be talking today about navigating macro shifts across the agri-food and health landscape. And what we're going to do today is focus on three things. First, we're going to focus on the key themes driving innovation 2025, because let's face it, we've had a lot of change and these needs have shifted. From there, we're going to break those down into the opportunities, but also the cautions within each opportunity that we highlight today, so that you can begin to think about how to make decisions moving forward. And lastly, we're going to walk you through an example that shows how to plan and navigate this uncertainty through innovation, particularly as it relates to consolidating technologies. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, as we look at these key themes driving innovation, the first one to focus on is innovating for impact. And yes, we all are always innovating for impact, but the paradigm is shifting. If we look at the two figures that I present below, you can see on the right, there's a focus and shift in R&D intensity. Overall, what we've seen is that investment in R&D has either stabilized or reduced. This graph below doesn't include inflation and is already showing a decline or a static trend there. What does that mean? It means we have to do more with less. Now, on top of that, if you look on the left, we have our Lux Tech signal, which is a leading indicator of innovation momentum. And you can see that if you look at 2021 for food and beverage, health, agriculture, we've hit a dramatic change. It's time to make new decisions around innovation. And those decisions are much different than they were just a year ago. And part of the thing that's at the heart of that change is regional strategy and how it's being driven through policy. And just as an example, if we look at three regions of the world and look at some of the core factors driving policy, we have the Americas, the EMEA, APAC here. If we look at the Americas, we have the, of course, notorious Make America Healthy Again strategy, which also, however, is failing to set a clear vision for innovation. We have this sort of selective emulation of what's going on in the EU, this combination of health and safety risks for children, bringing nutrition into the clinic to create more holistic health. However, right on top of that, we have conflicting issues with CDC firings for food safety, creating some uncertainty around what food safety and health, how those two things align. We have the abandonment of policies tied to meat and poultry and regarding pollution. And more interestingly, we have the cancellation of regional business centers. And that means that innovation help from government sources for new innovators is challenged. Now in EMEA, we have kind of a different situation. We have this new EU vision for agriculture and food. Green has become much more realistic or conservative. There's common green claims methodologies being brought forward. We have the EU easing restrictions on GMOs, something that has been difficult to do in the past. And we also have even the shift in their agriculture policy, particularly if we look at pesticides. We've moved from sort of sustainable use to just providing market access to those different alternatives. Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because of regional unrest. Food chain stability is taking priority over labeling policies. Now, in the APAC, something very different is going on. There's more of a response to these other changes that are happening. And as a result, we see that policy and technology are aligning over there. For instance, in biomanufacturing, we have fast tracking of industry expansion for biomanufacturing to serve this new demand. And we see health taking a much more important role. Health is aligning to labeling policy. Non-communicable diseases are taking a priority in healthcare. And we even have the need to build food resilience, which I think overall you can see is a clear need across the board. But that's not also where these challenges and shifts start. We also see a need to consolidate for growth. When it comes to making big changes to your innovation paradigm, consolidation is moving faster than ever before. And I think this graph really shows it. So here we're showing the key acquisitions and mergers of very large companies over the past 3 years. And what you see, yes, is that in APAC, at the pink at the bottom of this graph, there's smaller acquisitions going on. But if we look at the EMEAs and Americas here, we see that the growth in this has actually more than doubled, taken in a cumulative fact. And so what does this mean? It means that we've had this paradigm shift. There's new levers to pull, and companies are beginning to pull those in a very significant way. And what does that look like? Well, if we think about 2022, for instance, to 2024, we have a focus on sustainability, novel ingredients, digital transformation from left to right as the prioritization for innovation. But as a result of things like consolidation for growth, innovation for impact, and driving regional change, and this has shifted. Now we have health and wellness, resilience and biosynthesis, and digital food tech driving it. And now each of these three things has a different degree of impact, but what I've done is select the most prominent one for these. And what this does is sets us up to begin to investigate opportunities in cautionary areas for health and wellness, resilience and biosynthesis, and digital food tech. And so now what we're going to do is investigate those. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Nardev, to first and foremost talk about the opportunities and cautions in health and wellness. Nardev.
Thanks, Josh. Now, picture this. You wake up, grab your coffee, check your phone, and without realizing it, you're already running on metabolic autopilot. Every bite of food, every step you take or don't take feeds into this one invisible system that pretty much runs the entire show, your metabolism. Now, here's the headline. Over 50% of adults worldwide have some marker of poor metabolic health, whether that's blood sugar swings or high blood pressure or creeping weight gain. Yet for decades, we've kind of treated these issues as separate problems. In reality, they're all chapters in the same story. You can see some of the data here. Over 500 million people suffer from type 2 diabetes, right? And essentially, these are huge problems that needs addressing. Now, metabolic health is hot right now because it's finally being seen for what it is, right? The foundation for long-term health. It's not about chasing six-packs or crash diets, but it's about energy, resilience, brain power, and the ability to live longer, not just add years, but you want to add good years, right? And here's the interesting part. Your metabolism is deeply modifiable, right? Even if you have early signs of type 2 diabetes or what's called pre-diabetes, there are opportunities to actually potentially modify that. Technologies like continuous glucose monitors, wearables, and AI-driven nutrition apps are all, for the first time, starting to give people sort of almost superpowers, right? To be able to see in real time how their lifestyle choices can impact their biology. You eat a cookie, you see the spike, you take the walk, you see the recovery, and these feedback loops are almost immediate. In the same way that mental health became mainstream in the last decade, and especially more so over COVID, metabolic health is now really stepping into the spotlight. But, if we can optimize this hidden system, then we don't just prevent the disease, but we also unlock human potential. Now, in order to understand innovation in this space, and to basically assess innovation in any given area, at Lux, we've developed a methodology to assess this called the LuxTech signal, which Josh also touched on earlier. This essentially consolidates 5 sets of innovation data, including patent data, academic papers, VC funding data, government funding data, as well as our own Lux proprietary data. And all of these consolidated to give us the Lux Tech signal, which really is an indication of the innovation momentum in any given technology. And this is benchmarked against the hundreds of other technologies that we track across Lux. Now, of the many different technologies that we track in agri-food and health, there are 4 key technologies closely linked to metabolic health, namely consumer health wearables, functional health ingredients, sugar reduction, and consumer genomics. Now, while you'll see that all of these trend upward over a long time frame, you'll also appreciate the choppiness of these tech signals over short to medium time frames, which can potentially confound your strategic decision-making process around investments or partnerships, especially given some of the current market and geopolitical uncertainties that Josh pointed out earlier. So in order to help make sense of the flux that you see in the signals, we also looked at the tech signal rate of change, firstly from 2022 to 2024, and also just what's really happening or what we're seeing so far in 2025. And what we found for these 4 different technologies that we are tracking in metabolic health was rather remarkable. Now, just in 2025 alone, these 4 technologies are not just in the positive, as you see in the dark green bars, but they are showing mostly double-digit growth just in 2025 alone. This is in contrast to the preceding 3 years where the rates of change for these technologies were modest and even negative, right, for functional health ingredients and sugar reduction. And you can see the average of all the other technologies, 33 different technologies we track over there on the left-hand side of the bar, or this graph, So clearly, despite all that we have going on today, innovation continues to chart a very strong trajectory for metabolic health related technologies and should definitely be on your radar as you evaluate new areas of growth. Now, a really good example that illustrates this is the partnership between Oura Ring and Dexcom. Now, Oura Ring is one of the leading smart ring developers, and it developed a partnership with Dexcom, and Dexcom eventually made a pretty sizable investment of $75 million in order to integrate Dexcom, which is a leading medical device developer, to integrate its continuous glucose monitors with Aura smart ring to allow it for the first time to be connected with sleep, stress, and activity data, right? And connecting glucose trends with these lifestyle-based data allows essentially an understanding of how consumption of different food items and beverages can influence overall health in a closed-loop manner, allowing one to just not monitor, but also for the first time do something about it, right? And a company like Oura Ring has shown huge growth. They have sold over 2.5 million rings by late 2024 and reported that its member base more than doubled in 2024 alone. So clearly, this is an example where a strategic partnership between a health wearable developer and a medical device maker, in this case, unlocks new opportunities in metabolic health. And I think more importantly, for the agri-food and health sectors, enables a deeper level of insight and a closed-loop way to actually guide overall nutritional behavior. Now, despite the strong innovation momentum, some companies, unfortunately, have also struggled to make an impact. And one good example to highlight here is 23andMe, a consumer genomics developer. 23andMe has been around for some time. Some of you all may be familiar with them. They are direct-to-consumer genomic testing company, and they've developed various different kinds of reports, including those related to type 2 diabetes and weight management, framed for preventive health. But 23andMe essentially struggled with a weak recurring revenue model, data privacy and security issues, as well as limited clinical utility. They've struggled to really remain sustainable beyond that initial novelty and curiosity from consumers. right? And eventually saw multiple layoffs, board exits, and eventually a bankruptcy filing. So that highlights the challenges in consumer genomics, but there are companies that are actually starting to see some success in this space as well, especially nutrigenomics companies, which Josh will talk about a bit more later. But these companies are essentially leveraging B2B2C models with dietitians and nutritionists who leverage the data to guide their clients towards better health. So, allowing them to make better decisions. So with that, hopefully that gave you a sense of what's happening on the metabolic health side of things when it comes to health and wellness. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Harini. Over to you, Harini.
Thank you so much, Nardev. Now, kind of shifting a little bit of gears there and going to resilience and biosynthesis, we're going to look at the main drivers, but also the underlying technologies that are enabling the developments in biosynthesis. Now, biosynthesis is a topic, or if you want to call it biomanufacturing, right? I think that Lux has been covering for a number of years. And here today, we wanted to just highlight a few of the technologies that have evolved under this biosynthesis category, where we see some clear trends. Definitely upstream, we're starting with the alternatives to bio-based pesticides, including newer categories evolving there. Going into the ingredient side, we have food additives, whether you're talking about emulsifiers, texturizers, or even colors, right? I think there's a lot of momentum around that. And last but not the least, synthetic biology and precision fermentation being those technology which can actually enable making some of these ingredients there. And what you see on the right, again, the Lux Tech Signal, it's pretty clear that each of these technologies, they had their moment, right? When you think about that peak around 2021, 2022 that Josh brought up, I think a lot of these, especially for the biosynthesis, were fueled by, overhyped valuations and, venture capital flow there. And clearly we've seen that 24, 25, it's been a very, very sharp decline going into funding there. Again, a lot of this is driven by the fact that some of these platforms did not live up to the promises that they actually wanted to achieve, right? Whether it's moving from, the pilot scale to more commercial scale and really, going and targeting different applications. That being said, it's not all gloomy. Again, if you look a little bit deeper, I think the reason why we're bringing in this rate of change is because even though, on the surface level, everything looks a little bit gloomy here with biosynthesis, if you look a little bit carefully, I think you can really see some distinct signals, right? I think especially policies are evolving. And when you look at policies driving the ban of synthetic ingredients, right, particularly colors, we've seen that that's really pushing and creating the opportunity for more bio-based sourcing of food additives. So which is why even in 2025, despite all of this, decline in funding, we're definitely seeing an uptick in the rate of change for biosynthesis innovation as it pertains to food additives. And the same applies to biopesticides too, right? I think we're seeing a lot of big ag majors really looking at diversification and what does that mean for them in terms of going beyond their current portfolio of synthetics. And of course, that is also an important aspect for CPG companies, whether you're talking about food and beverage companies or beyond that, right? I think they really have to understand how they can actually adopt that downstream as well when it comes to biopesticides. So to make this all real, I'm going to show two examples. And again, the first one's going to be a little bit more on the optimistic side. So here, what I wanted to present is around this startup from Atlanta, relatively new one, a Japanese startup, which actually raised about 13 million. Sizable Series A, I would say, given the fact that there's a lot going on in this pretty tight, venture capital funding climate. What their platform does is pretty interesting, right? I think they're not going after some of the known ingredients. Instead, they are actually looking at alkaloids, flavonoids, even carotenoids, which are a bit difficult to produce, right, through chemical synthesis, and to be able to feed that into natural colorant portfolio for food and beverages. I think this is really an interesting move, and we've seen that as very much fitting the theme of how the intersection of evolving regulations and alternative production is really seeing a lot of momentum then. And especially for food and beverage clients who are in the confectionery, dairy, and snacking, I think this type of versatile platforms are one that you have to watch out for. Because at the end of the day, I think there's also an important downstream applicability for your particular product portfolio that's key here. So yeah, keep an eye on startups like Fermalanta. So definitely want to highlight here. Now, when you think about something as a cautionary story here, what I wanted to bring up is the recent developments with Friesland Campina. They're a very well-known Dutch dairy company. They made some very bold bets back in the days, I think a couple of years back, when they wanted to redefine themselves as a dairy company and invest in precision fermentation. Now in 2025, they just announced that they're going to be pausing all of their precision fermentation investment and refocusing back on core dairy value. And again, it's not because they're going to abandon long-term innovation. It really underscores how you have to balance sometimes, carefully picked ingredients that you have to produce and which you can actually scale through biosynthesis. And especially for companies which are at the core of, like, let's say, the incumbent technologies, right? I think for them, it's all about balancing cost, functionality, and performance. And I think this example of Friesland Campina is a good one to keep as a cautionary, reminder to say it's not all about just long-term innovation. You can still add value to your, short-term needs and gains there. So just another case study to keep in mind. So just to kind of, talk a little bit about beyond biosynthesis. And again, we're going to move to the next pillar, which is all around digital food tech. And again, digital transformation, as Josh pointed out, has been there and it's been driving the industry for a while. But what we've seen now is that this whole application of digital for this, not just for the sake of applying across the food value chain, but more so really enabling a core business outcome, right? I think we're bringing back that. We're seeing that digital food tech is definitely an interesting area and seen a big resurgence with the Gen AI wave. But again, what is necessary is to be able to really separate the hype from the reality. So under this pillar, what we're doing is tracking different technologies. Again, I'm just going to talk a bit about 4 of these across the value chain, from upstream ag to downstream. This is by no means exhaustive. You can always reach out to us if you're interested in more broader technologies too. The first one is on the ag side, on precision agriculture, and then going a little bit down, right? You're really thinking about how can you actually manufacture some of these, for food industry. I think it's an important area to look at, but also given the fact that a lot of food and beverage products are intricately associated with consumers, I think consumer sensory evaluation is another one, which I really think is also gaining momentum. Now, the tech signals, as you see here on the right, definitely show strong innovation momentum, especially if you look at precision agriculture. There is a real interesting spike in momentum. However, technologies like ingredient informatics, on the other hand, is kind of cooled down a bit, I would say. It's also become a pretty crowded space. And without clear differentiation, I think it has led to some of the startups even shutting down in the past 2 years. So a big lesson, again, to be able to think about what does it mean in applying digital to your food applications there. Now, the rate of change is, again, interesting to look here. Not all of them are equal, right? I think there have been a few which has seen differences here, and particularly precision agriculture, as I mentioned, is definitely on the high spirit now. You can see that it's really going a little bit more into adoption and how it's gaining momentum across different types of, deep tech players, but also the core agriculture players. However, ingredient informatics is kind of facing that steep decline, as I mentioned. Areas like consumer sensory tools, right? I think really thinking about how can you apply AI, but also beyond that, digital technologies to be able to, even replace or enhance consumer sensory panels. I think there's a lot of interest around that. But again, the signal is clear. You have to be selective when you think about where digital can deliver value. And I think not all of those are made equal. Couple of examples, again, one on the optimistic side and one on the more cautionary. Starting with the optimism, I think we've talked a lot about this through some of our recent reports as well, right? Precision agriculture is one that we've seen more vertically integrated companies and CPG players looking at that from a long-term perspective, right? It's both really helping them in directly adding value to their core, but also from a long-term perspective, it's something which I think a lot of these companies have to adopt. This one example from PepsiCo is interesting, right? They have a partnership with Yara, definitely working together to decarbonize agricultural inputs, which in fact, if you think about a lot of the core CPG companies today, 90 to 95% of the raw materials are actually sourced from agriculture. And to be able to have the sustainable sourcing combined with precision ag is really a game changer. And again, that could go into different kind of geographies too, right? I think the example here, what I'm talking about is also going beyond like the known regions here. Latin America is a big one for agriculture. So just to kind of give an example that if you are an integrated company or thinking about finding value through precision agriculture, I think to be able to find the right partner would be very important. And on the cautionary side, I think I already brought this a little bit. Is all about that companies gaining momentum, right? I think this one, Tastewise, they raised about 50 million. Again, it's very interesting to see that there is this type of funding available now. But the underlying, important takeaway is that despite these type of Gen AI platforms that can actually look at consumer trends, some of these are still reactive, right? They're more validation as opposed to being able to truly predict in some cases. Not saying that Tastewise is one that you have to be cautious about. It's more so the bigger, like overarching trend that really think about investing in tools that are, helping you in more predictive R&D reformulation or, combining consumer insight with that product strategy through technology, right? It's just definitely like, you don't want to put it in another trend spotting engine, right? It's already a crowded space. So think very critically when you're looking at use cases which could be actually enhanced by technologies like ingredient informatics. So in a nutshell, I think both for biosynthesis and for digital tools, what we're seeing is that there is a good dose of optimism, but also like a balance between optimism and caution, right? I think it really comes down to what's truly scalable, whether it's on the biosynthesis side, specifically with like all of these evolving regulations. I think you can really add targeted, I'd say, value to your portfolio. Which is what I think Josh will talk in a little bit, right? How do you really
Absolutely.
plan about for the future there? So over to you, Josh.
Yeah, so let's think about tying this knot together now. Nardev and Harini have both provided a good overview of what's going on, but how do we think about innovating for impact, regional policy, and consolidation for growth together through those elements? And that's what I want to do here. We've talked about health being a major lever for growth. And we've also shown this figure here where we have major areas of growth occurring, at least with the innovation signal. But the issue is that most of these are siloed today. So how do we tie them together in a way that we can create new opportunities? And that's what I want to leave you with. And Nardev already hinted at an example here, particularly as we have this new innovation nexus of metabolism emerging. Now, the example I'll talk about is one that I think is quite interesting to this end. We have, the reality is that metabolism, there's a stage gate of nutritionists, of the clinical health paradigm with it. But companies like Avexia, for instance, this is a pure play clinician and practitioner for diagnostics and making some health recommendations. And they're aligned to trying to shift to this point of care paradigm change that we're seeing. How do you get less people in hospitals, more people acting preventative to lower the cost of healthcare overall and perhaps even improve the quality? But the issue is, some of these are solely relegated to clinical that perhaps make them less accessible, less attractive to individuals. What we're seeing is a larger connection and consolidation of tools on the consumer side with the clinical side, particularly as we see an increase in interest in the use of nutritionists. And so companies like Nutrigenomics, for instance, are beginning to connect the inherent challenges that people face due to their genetics. So understanding genetic risks as far as nutrient metabolism, food intolerances, cardiometabolic health, to the more lifestyle affected changes of diagnostics, things like your A1C, glucose, those types of factors. So how do we connect those together? And that's exactly what these two companies are doing. They're marrying those two to understand inherent and lifestyle challenge risks, and then beginning to connect that to making recommendations. Now, this is limited currently to supplements that have claims, but making those recommendations to open up and create that stage gate access for products. Now, where does this become interesting for agri-food and health? It's not just about supplements. There's a new connection as we see companies like AG1 and others who perhaps have whole food supplements that can connect directly into different portfolios, or even food as health if claims are created. So what we need to do now moving forward in order to innovate for impact, find that regional change, and align on factors associated with consolidating innovation for growth is continue to identify these opportunities. Now, what I'm presenting here is a long-term opportunity, but as we improve these claims, as we continue to apply technologies to do that, you're going to see opportunities where this stage gate is beginning to open up. And so this is a long-term H3 style opportunity that we need to keep an eye on, especially as this lever for growth and health continues to emerge. So what I want to do is leave you with a few things today. First and foremost, key takeaways. One, as you've seen and through our Lux Tech signal, that we're in the middle of a tech ecosystem pivot, and that's happening, and we need to react. And we've told you about 3 different ways that you can react and how to react. But overall, number 2 is that health is the new driver. We've moved from sustainability as a driver to health being the major lever for creating growth. And the challenge here now is moving away from hype and siloed technologies to consolidated technologies that create real impact. So again, how do we create the impact for innovation? And then how do we position that regionally? And then lastly, integrate for success, but beware of overextension. I think we've seen a couple of those examples. A great one Harini brought up with biomanufacturing, saying it's great to look to integrate, but make sure you have something that's core to your business case. Otherwise, you're going to stretch your organization too far, and a niche opportunity isn't going to be enough to carry that innovation forward and become actually a sustainable, long-lived business. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to everybody. And we're going to now move towards a few questions. So again, thanks, and Harini Nardev. Come back online here and let's see what questions have emerged and see what we can think about. I'm just looking at questions here. Okay, so we have a few that have popped up. First one, I think, Nardev, this kind of fits with you and fits with some of the health discussion that we have. So we got, Aura integrating glucose monitoring, sleep, stress, activity, things like that. The question is a more challenging one. How do we embed these types of metabolic signals into the mainstream food and beverage offerings? So, everything from your breakfast solutions to snacking. How do we begin to integrate these, and what does it look like to do that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I think the key to think about here in these sort of partnerships is really the core that you're bringing into that partnership, right? As a smart ring maker or as a Dexcom, what are you bringing to that partnership, right? And how are you able to align, right, with the particular industry you're looking to impact, right? And the key is to focus on translation, not diagnosis, right? We don't need to replicate what companies are doing clinically and things like that, but rather, being able to integrate these into, for example, like co-branded dashboards to loyalty programs. For example, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're using the Aura Smart Ring, right? Your Aura sleep score says, you could sleep better. You didn't have a very good sleep. Here's a light functional beverage from your portfolio of products, right, in your loyalty program that you can select. that can help you improve your sleep tomorrow, right? Or here's a bunch of things that can increase, your overall, let's say, recovery process, right? Say from a tenuous exercise schedule, right? So these are some areas, right, where it goes hand in hand, right, and it's able to link your actual personalized data, right, and suggest products, right, based on their nutritional content to align with your health objectives, right, in a more sort of
Absolutely.
integrated way.
Now I'll put you on the spot for one more question, Nardev. We're talking about things, but what kind of horizon are you thinking about here when you say this? I mean, I imagine that these are not a tomorrow type of feature right now, because we still need to make claims in order to do it. So what time of timeline would you be placing on our ability to build out these claims so we can make these connections realistically?
Yeah, excellent question. I would say ambitious timeline would be something like 3 to 5 years, but 5
Absolutely.
years and onwards is you're looking at
most likely,
mainstream
for sure.
adoption. Because a lot of these right now, there's a lot of data collection and optimizing and learning what those weak signals are. But I think we're getting better every day, and we will get there.
And now it seems like the time to partner and understand those in order to continue to say what are the types of claims we'll be able to make in the future. So I love that. So let me move on to a final question in the name of time here. Let's see. Harini, this one is particularly for you. You brought up biomanufacturing, biosynthesis. As we think about that, and you brought up some cautionary tales, things like that, what's the next wave of innovation evolving for biosynthesis? Where should we be pushing our bets, especially as we see companies move to the idea of consolidation, really looking for scale versus pilots? What does that look like in your opinion?
That's a great question and a very, needed one, I would say, because if you think about what's happening in biosynthesis is that a lot of pilots, right? Pretty much like everybody could produce any ingredient or molecule, but the question is how can they scale it and bring it to that commercially viable opportunity? So to that end, I think what we're going to see in the next wave is a lot of focus into like manufacturing capabilities. So really like lowering capex. Whether it's on the downstream processing side or membrane innovation side, right? Some of these are like not so looked at, I would say, because a lot of the focus has been always around strain engineering and being able to like bring metabolically engineered strains faster. But the reality is that the cost of unit operations that's a lot when you want to scale some of these.
Absolutely.
So I would say the next wave of innovation is going to be around, really bringing the manufacturing cost down. That could be around both downstream processing, but also cutting down any of those unit operations associated with that.
Okay, great. And so again, in the name of time today, I think that's all we have time for today. But with that, again, what I want to do is say thanks to everybody. Thanks to Harini and Nardev. But that concludes our webinar. The slide, the presentations, the recording from the webinar will all be sent to any attendee via email today. And as always, after leaving the webinar, you're going to be prompted to complete a survey on today's presentation. And we always appreciate any feedback you may have because it helps inform and improve our webinars in the future to make them more impactful to you. So take a moment also and check out our upcoming webinars on our website. And thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.